All right, well, we've just sailed past 100 attendees, so it's my great pleasure today to welcome you to WWF Australia's webinar, Is a Renewable Recovery the Economic Cure for Australia? My name is Owen Wareham. It's my pleasure to MC today's panel. Before I begin, can I ask that wherever you are, you pause to reflect on the fact that in Australia, we're joining this webinar on the custodial land of the oldest living civilization in the world. For me, I pay my respects to both the Yagara people and the Turrbal people and their elders past, present and emerging. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome our guests and a special welcome to the 4 speakers we've got lined up to present today. I have Nicky Ison here, who's a colleague of mine at WWF Australia. Nicky is our Energy Transition Manager. We are also really lucky to be joined by Dan van Holst Pellekaan, the representative of the people of the electorate of Stuart in South Australia. And Dan is also the Minister for Energy and Mining for South Australia. Welcome, Dan. Karrina Nolan joins us. Karrina is the Director of Original Power. Original Power is a community-focused organisation that aims to build the power of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples through collective action. And last but certainly not least is Nicky Sparshott. Nicky is the CEO of Unilever ANZ and globally the CEO of T2 as well. Welcome, Nicky. A little bit of housekeeping. Over on at the bottom row of your Zoom, you should see an option to engage in a Q&A, and next to that you'll see the chat. We are very happy for people to have a chat in the chat, but please, if you'd like to pose a question or add your question to the list for discussion at the end, please drop that into the Q&A box, and our team of moderators at WWF will try and get to some of them at the end of the presentations. All right, well, without further ado, let me ask Nicky Ison to take the floor. Nicky is going to talk to us a little bit about why a renewable recovery is so important from WWF Australia's perspective.
Thanks, Owen. I would also like to acknowledge that we are on Aboriginal land and pay my respects where I am to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and to their elders past, present and emerging. So 2020, it's been quite the year. A year I really don't think like any other. We've faced 2 massive crises. The first, and well, the most recent, and the one that we're still in, a global pandemic of the scale that we have not seen in more than a century, that is leading to tragic loss of life and disturbing, disrupting and seeing massive downturns in economies around the world, including our own. Then, of course, there's the climate crisis, and we saw the manifestation of that crisis in the bushfires earlier this year, which were at a scale and a level that we have never seen before. Again, leading to tragic loss of life, loss of homes, and as WWF reported this week, the loss of 3 billion animals. With crisis comes opportunity, and with 2 crises comes a really huge opportunity. And that opportunity, the nexus between those 2 crises really is renewable energy and the opportunity to transition Australia to a clean and low carbon future. We have seen today the Australian Energy Market Operator release a blueprint for how we can move to a clean energy future. And that is why we at WWF are running a campaign to secure a renewable recovery. We're calling on all state, territory and the federal government to deliver stimulus programs that would unlock new jobs, stimulate our economy and accelerate that transition to clean energy, and in so doing position us as a renewable export superpower. Australia is really the lucky country, and we have. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Karrina, who will talk about, how Aboriginal communities, have been, living on this nation for 60,000 years or more, and how we can learn from those and how renewables intersects with those communities. But as whitefellas and newer migrants to this country, we are blessed with abundant land, some of the best wind and solar resources in the world, and a country that others are looking to and see the opportunity to help them decarbonise. So those opportunities are abundant, and we're seeing businesses step up, we're seeing state governments step up, and I'm looking forward to hearing our other speakers talk about what is happening in those realms. But really the opportunity for all of us is to pursue a federal stimulus package that really accelerates that transition to clean energy, while also putting people to work, creating meaningful work and meaningful jobs in a moment where we are facing massive crises and things need to change. So we at WWF are working, we worked with EY to produce a report that looked at the opportunities of a renewable recovery, and they found that there was the potential for more than 100,000 jobs, and that there would be 3 times as many jobs in a renewable recovery than a fossil fuel-based recovery. From there, we've identified a package of 5 stimulus measures, a $2 billion package, and we're advocating for that at a federal level and working as well with state and territory governments to support them to do similar work. We are engaging with both community organisations and businesses to champion a renewable recovery, and today we are out in the media calling for that too. So this is just the beginning of a campaign that will ramp up towards the federal budget in October 6th, but may continue beyond that, and we really hope that you will get involved.
Thank you, Nicky. That was great little insights there. Can I now throw to the Honourable Dan van Holst Pellekaan? Sorry, Dan, I know you told me to be less formal, but I couldn't help myself. But we'd love to hear from you about why a renewable recovery is important for South Australia.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Owen. Thank you to you and WWF for inviting me to participate. And it's lovely to be here with Nicky and Karrina and Nicky. And I too very happily acknowledge that where I am at the moment is Kaurna land. Where I live, 300 kilometres north of Adelaide, is Nukunu land, and anywhere that any of us go to live, work, play, visit friends, whatever we do, anywhere in Australia, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. With regard to renewables and a renewables-led recovery, our South Australian government is very happy to be on board with that. We are already working towards that. It's important that I say, of course, that lots of different industries and interest groups believe that their area is the one that can be the one to lead the recovery, and the truth is that it will be quite a few different areas that will have a lot to offer. But energy underpins, almost everything that we do. So we are determined to make sure that we continue the transition away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. I believe very firmly we need to get the mix right. I'm not one at all to want to slow things down, but if we jump too quickly and if we run foul with regard to high prices, with regard to reliability, then we will run foul of consumers. And one of the things that we have at the moment is not every person in every corner of the nation, but we have an overwhelmingly strong general public support for renewable energy and cleaning up not only the planet, but the things that we all do on the planet. But if electricity becomes unreliable, we have more blackouts. If it becomes too expensive, consumers will bear the brunt of that, and their enthusiasm will be dampened. So in South Australia, we believe very strongly we must continue to grow the share of renewable energy in our total electricity mix. But we need to do it in a way that works for consumers. We need to get prices lower. We need to make electricity more reliable. And we believe that we are starting to see those things happen. Well, we are starting to see those things happen from some of our policies. We are very focused on the economic benefits. It was mentioned before that, there's a lot of jobs. Nicky said a huge amount of jobs in renewable energy compared to fossil fuels, and it's true. Renewable energy is also the cheapest new build electricity generation available. And so we need to make the most of that as well. What we have to do though is in my mind, is think not only about the generation, we have to think about the the storage and the use of it as well. So large and small scale storage programs. We have a $50 million grid scale storage program. We have a $100 million household battery scheme, which has encouraged 2 new household battery companies into South Australia. One is now manufacturing, one is still assembling. But, you know, new businesses, one in the north, one in the south of Adelaide, and we want that to continue to grow. Demand management, incredibly important. Not enough time really to go into that in great detail at the moment, but huge opportunities there for consumers to get wins, for the grid to get wins, and for the environment to get wins. We've got a $30 million package to run trials with organisations to figure out what's the best way to look to structure demand management. We have 8 virtual power plants running now in South Australia, one of which the state government is a partner with, using what we call housing trust or public housing in partnership with Tesla. So we're doing everything that we can with our policies. We also have a very clear commitment to the net 100% renewable electricity generation. The official government line is in the 2030s. My personal and clearly articulated ambition is by 2030. I believe South Australia can be a net 100% renewable energy electricity generator by 2030. And that's one of my personal goals in this area of work. So I've probably used my 5 minutes there, Owen, but I look forward to participating with Nicky and Karrina in the question and answer stage a bit later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. You used those 5 minutes very well, though, and I can really, we can really see that challenge of balancing kind of people's enthusiasm for renewables and the policy challenge, and I can tell that your government is working very tirelessly to that end, and the people challenge is a real focus of ours as well. So that's fantastic. It's now my real great pleasure to welcome Karrina and Nolan to the floor. Karrina is going to talk a little bit about why a renewable recovery is really important, both for Aboriginal power and Indigenous communities more broadly.
Thanks, Owen, and thanks everyone. And I'd also like to acknowledge country. I'm actually on the land of the Larrakia Nation here in Darwin, but acknowledge all land is unceded Aboriginal land, and pay respects to our old people who continue to care for country, but also often make difficult decisions and sacrifices to protect our lands and waters for all of our mob. My mob's from Yorta Yorta Nation. I'm a descendant of the Yorta Yorta people in Victoria. And yes, our organisation is about building capacity and power of our mob right across the country to self-determine what happens in our communities. And particularly we're doing that in the context of climate change and also working with communities who want to determine that clean energy is the thing that people want to see, but particularly on their terms. And I think I just need to mention that this is in the context of the unforgivable behaviour of Rio Tinto a couple of months ago and the destruction of the Juukan Gorge caves, 46,000-year-old caves in Western Australia. This is not necessarily a new thing for many of our communities, but I think what it has led to for the rest of the country and the rest of the nation is a growing understanding that there's a crisis in the way that our country and land and culture is viewed, and that it's so critical that now more than ever we determine what happens on our country. And so in the context of renewable energy, we want to make sure that our communities that all of those projects are being driven by us, for us. So, one of the key reasons for us that we are engaged in this is that we are seeing pretty extreme energy poverty in remote outstations and homelands right across the country. To get a steady, affordable supply of energy is often really difficult for people. People are relying on really expensive, polluting diesel, spending thousands of dollars a month on power bills. Households are regularly being cut off, which means food goes bad. Cooling can be a really difficult issue for people. We're seeing, particularly in the Northern Territory, where the number of days over 35 because of climate change and the use of fossil fuels is going to increase in 10 years to 137 days a year. So if we've got people that are already having to develop safe rooms, which is one room in the house that's kept cool, and then have old people taking turns to sleep, we've got a real energy crisis on our hands for many of our remote mob. And we know that people have been campaigning for sort of energy efficient, climate safe housing and so on. So we need to make sure that we're also looking at small scale, locally driven, locally led community projects. And where this has been going on, so I think one of the great examples is the bushlight systems that rolled out for over a decade in Northern Territory and WA. It's been really transformative. You know, we heard stories even just last week talking to people where they said when that first happened over sort of 10 years ago, some of the men who were responsible for keeping the generators going could actually sleep all night because they didn't have to have their ear out waiting for the generator to go off, or people could actually have their fridges on for 24 hours. I think something that people take for granted who live in the cities. So that's, of course, on a local level, designed by mob, for mob, making sure there's local employment opportunities and not contributing to climate change, I think is really critical. But then we're also seeing, I think, this significant revolution going on at a large scale. And I think people have already sort of talked this a little bit, and this is sort of this large scale and export projects. And we really want to make sure that people aren't talking about those being based on Australia as a continent with, you know, large untapped resources. This is all Aboriginal land. So ultimately, no consent, no projects. So we won't be seeing that revolution roll out if our communities aren't on board from the outset. And there's numerous really exciting projects, Sun Cable in Northern Territory, Asia Renewable Energy Hub in the Pilbara, but our mob must be part of that as an economic development opportunity, and not just resources that are then exported overseas without ensuring that those local homelands are actually benefiting from the power as well, and those local jobs, as I mentioned before. There are a couple of great examples. I know we're sort of short on time, but the Indigenous Carbon Farming Network have been coming up with some really awesome principles of large-scale projects, but also ensuring that the industry do the right thing. In Canada, where they've been doing this for sort of 20-odd years, there's some great examples there of how people have actually, produced billions of dollars in revenue, but also lots of local jobs that are driven by those nations. And I think I'd just sort of say a couple of things about the things we don't want to see repeated from the mining industry and that we do want to see, and then a little bit just about this $70 million stimulus that we're asking for. So we don't want to see some of the same mistakes that have come through from the mining industry, which really has caused a divide and conquer mentality. We don't need to do it that way. We want to see people, the power imbalance addressed between companies and communities, and that people really have control over the cultural protection of their country. So we're looking for real partnerships, training and education, local design. And I think one of the other things that's really critical here is that aspirations must be greater than what we've seen around extractive mining. Why can't we ask for, a stake in these businesses? Why can't there be, Indigenous only procurement, etc.? So there's a whole bunch of those things for us to think about. So we're looking for, a boost in this stimulus, a $70 million ask that goes into projects that address energy poverty, locally driven. There could be feasibility studies to look at what's the best process, infrastructure, storage needs, microgrids, etc., that address local needs. And I think we would just say that this can be done the right way, and we're really excited about seeing this opportunity in the hands of our people to make sure that actually there's energy security for generations to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Karrina. You weren't even close to bumping your time limit. I really appreciate thank you. We really appreciate the insight that you bring to this this conversation, and particularly the points that you make about this being a real opportunity for us. Can I now please ask Nicky Sparshott to address the floor? Nicky is going to talk to us a little bit about why a renewable recovery is important for business more generally, and specifically in the context of Unilever.
Well, thank you, and hello to everybody. I'm also on Gadigal land and would like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and in particular the incredible knowledge and expertise that we can learn from in terms of how to live in harmony with the land. I think there's something for us to take forward in that as we look to a more sustainable focused future for Australia. So there's this great quote, which is, if you're not reimagining the future, then you're just re-engineering the past. And I think the current situation that we find ourselves in with COVID is actually a great pause and opportunity to reset. I think that the coronavirus has been a really stark reminder of the fragility of our economy, but climate change is another threat to our shared security. And as a large and really complex business, Unilever has already felt the cost and the impact in our own operations of what extreme weather patterns can do. We've done some high-level assessments to understand what would happen with a sort of 2-degree or 4-degree warming scenario. And the impact is extreme on business. We would be seeing real disruptions to agricultural value chains, which would threaten food security for sure, and see increases in raw materials. We would see increasing water scarcity. We would see and have seen disruptions to our manufacturing and distribution channels. And I think even the recent bushfires were a real testament to what can happen in that space. But we've also seen that these extreme weather patterns can reduce economic activity. People just are out and about less, they're more concerned, and that reduces demand for goods and services. That then has an impact on the economy and on GDP. And we also see it through sort of carbon pricing, resulting in escalating costs in order to be able to run a business effectively. So look, there's a really strong case for business and the role that renewable energy can play. Not only as a way to be much more resilient as an organisation, but also because organisations have a really big responsibility to take up this charge to create a more positive future, a much more sustainable future for Australians. So in January of this year at Unilever, we actually went 100% renewable energy in all of our operations. And aside from the fact that that was able to help us reduce 31,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas, we also saw some benefits in reduction in costs. We were able to protect ourselves more from volatility in energy markets, which also then allows us to plan in a much more purposeful way how we can invest in the next generation. So the next source of green energy that can help to shore up the business. And I don't want Unilever to be leading the way in this space. I want everybody to be doing this and setting a new benchmark for how businesses can run in a way that not only generates profit, but has a regenerative impact on the environment and also on the communities that we serve. But, you know, above all, people, citizens of Australia are demanding this. Their consumers are seeking to buy from companies that can demonstrate that they've produced products in sustainable ways that haven't detracted from the environment. And that drives growth, which is obviously incredibly important for businesses. In addition to that, we're able to attract investment. We're finding more than ever before, investors are looking at the carbon risk profile of organisations and are also choosing to make investment decisions based on that. You know, I think there's nothing more powerful for us than demonstrating to government that accelerating progress on a carbon-free future is actually possible. Is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Definitely. We've taken up some really big ambitions, and whilst we've seen some progress even at a government level, it's not enough. We need to set our ambitions higher. This race to zero is going to be a collective effort, and it's going to require a coalition of the willing and able to make it happen, from government to industry to NGOs and to the community. I mean, we call it an ambition loop, a collective action to make really positive progress in this space. At Unilever, we've set the bar even higher. We recently announced some new commitments to be net zero emissions from all of our products. So that's from sourcing right through to what you find on shelf by 2039. So that's 11 years ahead of the Paris Agreement commitments. And we want to be able to ultimately be a positive contributor back to energy that can then be used by communities. So we're going to need government and other industry groups, NGOs and community, to take action with us, because when we do, we can set up an incredible future for Australians that has clean air, great jobs, and is a much healthier environment for us all to live in.
Thank you, Nicky. That was really lovely put. Thank you. I think it's really clear right across the whole panel that the case for why we have to do this is just rock solid. You know, there's opportunities in every sector and right across society, and I think that's really exciting. And so what we're going to do in the panel discussion now is kind of shift from the why and more into the how we can make this happen. And so my first question to the panel, and I'm happy to hear from all of you on this, is what do you think is different about this moment and this year? Obviously 2020 is different in so many ways, but even aside from the really obvious things, what's different about this year compared to all that's come before in relation to clean energy and action on a renewable recovery? Nicky, Ison, I might throw to you first, if you'd like, and then we'll go to the panel.
Not to, but I can give it a go.
Sure.
Look, I think that there's some conditions that emerged in the last year, which was that we really saw every state and territory government make more ambitious renewables commitments. That combined with the bushfires, that combined with really businesses and platforms like the Business Renewable Centre that we run in at WWF and RE100, giving a platform to business to make more ambitious commitments, have all created the conditions where this transition now is not just, it is inevitable, but it feels inevitable as well. And that the people who just, in the lead up to the last federal election, were really creating quite a conflict around this idea of moving to clean energy. They're just not as prominent anymore. So we have a whole lot of ripening conditions that then you put a global pandemic on top of, creates, forces politicians, businesses, ourselves to do things differently. So yeah, I think that, we've got a marrying of those two things, and I would say, and I would echo what Dan said, which was around the fact that renewables are now cheaper. And I think one of the things that this moment and this need for economic stimulus, and economists are saying there is an absolute need for economic stimulus, what it enables us to do is look beyond what we've currently been looking at. We've been looking at the transition of the electricity sector, but now what about transport? What about industry? What about our exports? And I think that's the conversation we're really starting to have. And I find that really exciting.
Thank you. Well, I might throw to Dan on that then. Dan, what's it like to be a decision maker in a year like this? And why is this year special?
Well, it's unique, that's for sure. It is challenging. And, to pick up on one of the things that Nicky said, it's terrific that there is essentially throughout society in Australia an acceptance of the inevitability of cleaner, cleaner world, cleaner society, cleaner production, which is good. Even the political, discourse is arguing about how to get there. It's not about whether we're going there or not. And I think, in that context then, that should give us all a great deal of optimism. There are some challenges though, right? I mean, we all want stimulus. We want stimulus for the right reasons. I always think of stimulus and economic recovery in three ways. One is the investment needs to get money moving, get jobs created, get things happening so that you can get some economic activity pretty quickly and through the life of the development of the project. Then you need to be sure that you're left with some productivity gains and this is usually through infrastructure, but not always, that weren't there before, so that when the stimulus is finished, you've got a more productive things in place. And then you need something else. Third thing, far more open, far more tangible. In my mind, it could be a social thing, like something that is going to lead to a reduction in domestic violence, something that's going to lead to a cleaner environment, something that does something else. So economic stimulus, really straight away, because that's necessary. Longer term productivity and another less tangible. When you get those three things together, you know you're in with a chance. And I do see renewable energy and a cleaner world very much as part of that. And but budgets are tight. So where's the money going to come from? Just about every economy in the world at the moment is really struggling for money. I think one of the ways to try and overcome that is to really focus on what I see, I perceive. Everybody is really focused on improving their sovereign capacity, their local ability to do things better. And while, of course, there's an argument about conflict or potential conflict between nations, I'm actually not referring to that at all. I'm actually talking about the fact that when anything goes completely out of whack and causes you stress and harm and difficulty and you didn't expect it, you need to be able to look after yourself a bit better. There's a human desire. Now, yourself being your family, your community, your state, your nation, the world, it doesn't matter what group you choose for that. So why on earth wouldn't we want then to have an overwhelmingly renewable energy powered world? Nobody saw the massive constriction on our economy because of the need to really lock down the movement of people. Nobody saw that, but we're blessed in Australia, South Australia particularly, sun and wind. There's tides and all sorts of things. Why wouldn't we want to use those things that we've got even more to make sure that we can make our own electricity, our own energy, even more securely to look after our own needs in this current environment?
Thank you. Karrina, I'm interested in your views here. What's different about 2020?
Oh, so many things. But I think probably one of the things that's interesting is that we have seen the Aboriginal leadership, and I think this is Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations, peak bodies, really show what it looks like when our people lead. And I'm thinking in terms of the protection of our remote and regional communities around shutting down around the virus. So the COVID response of our leadership was really quite amazing. And I think, protecting our communities who and still are, highly at risk and vulnerable when it comes to COVID. So seeing that and knowing that that's what it can look like and how successful it's been when we actually are in charge of our own affairs. So I think there's some lessons in that for us in terms of climate change, clean energy, and us being at the table and part of those decision-making forums that actually when people get out of the way and let us lead, I think we can make some really good decisions about what needs to happen on country.
Thank you. And Nicky, you see the world. What's this year doing differently?
I think at the heart of it, we've seen the highest amount of stimulus going into the economy than we've ever seen before. There is a real opportunity here for some of that to be directed to climate action at its core, in a way that recognises that we have got emerging economic challenges coming up. So do it in a way that creates jobs, that allows us to reskill our workers, that enables innovation in existing industries and future industries, that allows us to create real export opportunities. So we not only secure today, but we really set Australia up as a real leader in this renewable energy space moving forward. So I think what I have been encouraged to see this year is that when governments choose to, they can come together to really serve communities. I think we've seen that in the way governments have reacted to the challenge of COVID in Australia. I think that should give us really good confidence and a base on which to do that again, but in a bipartisan way for climate action that serves the environment, also serves our communities, stimulates the economy, and sets us on a path to a much more future-focused, sustainable future.
Thanks, Nicky. We'll move to another question. Around the world, we're seeing huge clean energy stimulus packages, and this is kind of aside from COVID. There's 46 billion on the table in Germany, 3 billion in the UK with more to come, and Joe Biden's climate plan is a $2 trillion plan. What do we think it is about Australia that makes us different, and what will it take to ensure Australia isn't left behind when that's the kind of global race we're facing? And I might go back to you, Nicky Sparshott, to start the answer to that one.
Yeah, so look, I think at the heart of it, climate action requires real transformational change. Like, we need to create the right context for businesses and other people to take the right action. So create the right policies that then incentivize the right behaviours. I think the government has made some good progress. My ask of government and also industry is to ramp up the ambition and to recognise that we need to make some really material steps on this. And the best way to do it is really collective action. So when we all come together to leverage the expertise that sits across government, industry, NGO and the community to make this change, then we have a chance of actually doing something fairly remarkable here. That, you know, we call it an ambition loop, but that ambition loop of constantly bringing the right people together, rechecking, making small steps that have big impact, I think is really where we need to be in Australia right now. Just really set that ambition to meet those commitments of the Paris Agreement and pull out all stops to get there.
Dan, can I ask you how you see kind of Australia competing in the world? And I guess you could also, if you wanted to, touch a little on how South Australia competes with the other states of the country.
Yeah, well, to pick up on Nicky's comment about ambition, I mean, we're not short of that in South Australia. You know, net 100% renewables in 10 years is my goal, as you know. I'd say, you know, we had a change of government 2 years ago. Full credit to the previous Labor government for proving how good in South Australia we can be at generating electricity. Give them full marks for that, and our renewable penetration is very high by you know, Australian and international standards. But what I know that we need to now do is not just focus on renewable generation. We need to focus on the management of renewable energy. As I said, you know, before, you know, storage, demand management. I didn't mention interconnection, but that's another key part of it. If we just look for greater and greater penetration, we're actually going to get ourselves in more and more strife. Prices would have kept going up and more blackouts. We're determined, as I said before, to manage this transition properly over time. So in terms of where we sit compared to other states, which is part of your question, Owen, you know, we are well ahead of other states with regard to renewable energy penetration. We are now just starting to get back into the mix with regard to wholesale electricity prices. South Australia had the highest wholesale electricity prices of all states in the NEM for a very, very long time. And we are now knocking on the door. In fact, we're a little bit below for the last few months, Victoria and New South Wales. So that's good for our South Australian consumers, of course, but it's also good to prove that it can work. It's also good to say that if you try and manage your renewable energy generation, it can work by other ways of measuring success as well as emissions. And then the last thing I'd like to say is, with regard to, you know, where does the money come from? How do we do well compared to other places? Mm-hmm. And, you know, Nicky said massive stimulus before, and yes, she's quite right, but it's not a bottomless pit. What we've done, not a bottomless pit of money, what we've done is put additional money into what we call our Economic and Business Growth Fund, which is it's a competitive fund within the South Australian government in partnership with industry and community. But a lot of that money is being won for projects in a competitive way, which are tied up with renewable energy. So, you know, we have money specifically linked with hydrogen. I'm hoping very soon, I mean, I'm still in the competitions phase for this, but I'm hoping we'll have money for electric vehicles and a charging network soon. That decision is still to be made, I have to say, but I'm optimistic. So we are taking that money, which is by definition there for economic growth, and we are using it in a renewable energy, clean energy way to get economic growth. And we are very, very focused on that in South Australia.
Thanks, Dan. I might now, if it's okay with the panel, move to a question from our audience. And I suspect Nicky and Karrina could give us some strong answers on this one to start with. Stephanie Carrick asks, what are your thoughts on the National Cabinet Task Force recommending subsidising new gas projects for post-COVID economic recovery?
Owen, you guessed I might have something to say about this. And I mean, I think it's in relation to the last question as well. Like in terms of, you know, us not being left behind and, you know, pouring lots of money into gas, I guess our communities, you know, people talk about transition, but our communities are still on the front line of new projects. So new fossil fuel projects. And it would be, you know, that some of the traditional owners I work with would be pretty disappointed if I didn't mention that people really want to see that gas kept in the ground. So of course, people would be more interested in those subsidies that are being poured into gas infrastructure and through the COVID Commission into renewable energy. And I think, you know, we're going to look back on this period of time and just see how crazy we are to be making those kinds of decisions about the sort of investment that's really needed. This is, you know, this is our moment. This is an opportunity to do things differently. We know it's possible. We have the resources, we have the technology, we have the expertise, you know, to be investing in outdated fossil fuels. I just think at this point in time is nothing other than crazy.
Yeah, I think I might jump in and go, yeah, it doesn't seem to make much sense. It seems to be coming from an ideological position or an idea that we want to emulate the US. They've had this gas boom, basically off the back of a whole bunch of companies that are now starting to go bankrupt. And it just doesn't seem to make sense. So like, first is you've had 3 companies, major gas companies, including Shell, come out and say this idea of cheap gas is just not feasible in Australia. You know, gas below $6 a gigajoule just isn't a long-term proposition for Australia. The second is we don't need it. We have some of the best wind and solar resources in the world. It is the cheapest thing to power our electricity sector, and increasingly it will become the cheapest thing to power our transport and industrial sectors and heat our homes as well. Certainly in Victoria, there's you know, recent report out that shows that the best way to heat your home is with an air conditioner, not with a gas heater. So you know, there's cheaper ways of doing things. And third, just from a climate change perspective, you know, gas is a polluting fuel and it's taking us in the wrong direction. In fact, gas extraction, particularly for exports, is the biggest increasing source of our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to be sending them the other way and not this way. So it really detracts from that opportunity of both the short-term clean economy stimulus and that bigger renewable export powerhouse vision that we're talking about.
Thanks, Nicky. Dan or Nicky, did you have a comment on that one as well?
I would echo the sentiment. I think there are many other options that can be considered and should be considered.
Thanks. And I think Dan was trying to say something, but we might have left him on mute. Sorry.
Wait.
Hold on, Dan. Sorry.
Okay,
you're good now.
Apologies. Well, look, I will fall foul of my co-panelists and possibly some of the people listening at the moment, because I do have a different view. It's not that we should be looking for a gas-led recovery or anything like that, but I think it's important to recognise that gas will be with us for quite a long time, less and less gas over time, but it will be with us for a while. So my focus is actually on how we use the gas. And there's huge opportunities, I believe, in investment of new, modern, fast start, fast stop gas generation. And the reason I say that is not because I'm trying to prolong the life of gas. I stand by everything that I've said already today, but we'll use less gas then. One of the constraints on renewable energy is that it's not there all of the time. Our demand management, our interconnection, our storage aren't there yet to fill all of the gaps that we need with regard to renewable energy generation. So I'm actually keen, and I say this as honestly as I can, understanding it may not be popular, but I'm really keen on investment in the new fast start gas technology, because we'll use less gas then. Generators that can enter and leave the market in 3-4 minutes instead of 3-4 hours. They burn less gas to create the same amount of electricity. And in an ironic way, but a very accurate way, if we have a bit more, and I'm not talking about overwhelming the generation market, but if we have a bit more of that type of technology, we will then enable more renewable energy. We'll get more renewable energy, we'll get less gas used if we have an investment in this modern gas generation, which only has to run, you know, a small, you know, share of the time, but it will allow us to then rely more than we already do on renewable energy generation and be there while, and we do need the time, as nice as it would be to think we're there, yet we're not, while we actually get our small and large scale storage and our demand management up to speed over the next decade or so. So that's my honest view. I'd never want to come on a panel and not share as clearly as I can. And I know that I'm out of steps with my colleagues by saying that. So thanks, Owen.
Well, I just might jump in there and go, you know, look, I think we will agree to disagree, Dan, but I think some of the key opportunities that we've identified at WWF are really in how do we help manufacturers, particularly small manufacturers with using gas boilers, like, you know, Nicky's company, many of her companies use them. How can we support them to electrify? How can we support them to go to renewable sources of heat and reduce the demand for gas in those other sectors, less so in the electricity sector, but more so in that industry? And certainly we've identified that nationally there's about 22,000 short-term jobs in helping to electrify industry. And I think that is a missing part of the conversation and missing part of this manufacturing conversation that we're having, because unfortunately manufacturing processes in Australia are some of the most inefficient in the industrialized world. And so this is an opportunity to increase the energy productivity of companies and help switch away from gas to renewables through renewable sources of heat and heat pumps. And unfortunately, we are currently lagging behind that in other parts of the world. So it's really that sort of short-term opportunity, and one I would put to you as an opportunity for South Australia to maximise the benefits of its abundant renewables. You can take that one on notice.
Oh, I wasn't sure. I was waiting for Owen to invite me in.
Dan, you're welcome to respond if you like, or we can move on. I've got another one.
Look, there's much of that I agree with, Nicky. We are focused on that in South Australia as well. But I guess I come back to one of my underlying beliefs. We've got to get the mix right. We really got to get the mix right to keep moving forward towards less fossil fuels, more renewable energy, a cleaner world, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to get the mix right. And I just have a belief that smart gas generation using far less gas than we've ever used before is going to be part of that mix, as well as some of the things that you just mentioned.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to make the assessment that I think we agree on much more than we disagree on in that regard.
Absolutely.
And I'm also going to use my creative license as moderator to kind of combine two questions. Andy Marks asks, what is the role of business leaders in helping ensure federal government steps up their commitment to renewables? And I know that alongside the question about business leadership, there's a question from Miriam asking Dan whether you would help champion WWF's $2 billion renewable recovery stimulus package. So the broader question I'm going to ask both of you is what's the role of leaders in Australian society today to step up and help try and secure an economic recovery through renewable means? And I'll go to Nicky Sparshott first.
Sure. So the first thing I would say, and I've said it a few times, I think it's really important, is that this is going to require collective action and real partnership. So the first thing is to partner with government, so not stand against, but with them in order to be able to make this change and influence the requisite changes in policies that put the right incentives in place for action to be enabled at an accelerated pace. I think for businesses, it's about demonstrating with real action. So setting ambitious targets in our own organisations and actively pursuing them and demonstrating that aiming for a net zero carbon future can be done. I think it's about advocating, or the advocacy for change. So having a voice around what industry needs, but also, and more importantly, to be a voice for the consumer, to be the voice for the community who are actively looking for products and services that are produced in a sustainable way. And when we don't act, then what we know for sure is that consumers will. with the choices that they make. So being that voice of the consumer, and then setting just really ambitious targets. I would rather set a really ambitious target and fall slightly short of it than to set something a little average and not quite raise the bar high enough. So I think we have an opportunity to really, again, go back to that ambition loop and work together right now. It's why we support WWF's call for this investment, because we believe that the choices that are being made here do allow us to create jobs, to stimulate the economy, to reskill, to create more impetus for local manufacturing, and simultaneously set us on that path for a much more sustainable, future-focused Australia.
Thanks, Nicky. Dan?
Just about everything we do in South Australia in the energy space is in partnership with industry. All of our funding goes towards co-funding projects. We're actually very fortunate to have outstanding business partners, large, medium, and small, in South Australia with whom we partner. And I'm very grateful to our business community in general. I'm not saying every single company everywhere, but in general, the South Australian business community is well and truly on board with the directions that we are taking and with our policies. We will be, and this might be a surprise to some people, in a few to several years, the middle of maybe 2025, we will be around about 80 to 85% renewable energy penetration in our electricity generation mix in South Australia. We are doing absolutely everything we can to continue that way. But as is true in lots of endeavours, the beginning is extra hard and the end is often extra hard too. We won't get to 100% by doing the things that we've been doing, moving from 50 to 80. We need, it actually gets tougher and tougher and tougher to get to that 100%. And we'll only do that when we do that in partnership with industry. And just for Miriam's question, I don't want anybody to think I'm dodging that. I'm not sure that's a yes or a no answer on the spot. Would I be prepared to champion the $2 billion fund with WWF? But I have no doubt that our South Australian energy policies and WWF's priorities are well aligned, not exactly, but well aligned. And wherever that's the case, very happy to be involved.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Karrina, I might ask you, you're an expert in community organising. What is it that those of us who don't see ourselves necessarily as either political leaders or business leaders, what can we do to help shift the power balance there?
Well, I was just going to make a comment on business though as well, because I think
Great, please.
We need to see leadership from businesses and role model sound, responsible corporate behaviour. And actually, particularly given the recent events in Western Australia, this is an opportunity for corporates to push government actually to potentially redesign cultural heritage laws. But I guess the other side of that is, we could see risks to investors and businesses because there's such a low level of trust, I would say, across the board from traditional owners in lots of places at the moment, that new projects, even though they're ethical, clean energy projects, will be difficult because people haven't seen evidence that this industry is going to do it differently. So I think that the ask is investors putting pressure on businesses and companies to do it responsibly, do it well. And what we're looking for is to be part of the conversation, part of the policy, part of the decision-making at those tables, making the decisions, making sure this is designed for us in a way that's going to work for our communities.
Thanks, Karrina. Nicky, have you got a final comment on that one?
No.
Lucky to have a panel around you that say everything that needs to be said. Look, we are almost at time today, unfortunately, but I wanted to, again, thank the panel for such fantastic contributions and such an interesting discussion. Secondly, I wanted to thank all of our attendees for coming along and listening along today. We really appreciate having you. I hope you've learned something, and please keep engaged on this topic. We'd love if you can help us by sharing our content around this. And also if you happen to be a business decision maker or someone involved in this space, we'd love to hear from you. I am about to take the liberty of sharing with you my screen, and on that screen, fingers crossed everyone can see it. Can anyone tell me if they can see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. This is the address that we'd love to hear from you at if you've got a business that would like to be involved in helping to champion this topic for us. And these are our handles. Please do continue to engage with us. And as you file out of the auditorium today, please enjoy this little sizzle video that our team have put together to kind of show what we see as being possible in this realm. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon.